not able to join.
Okay, hang on 1 second.
Williams.
I'm getting this set up here to record on YouTube. Hang on 1 sec.
Oh, well.
Please mute that.
All right, 25 out of 30. And let me what's his name back in here. I think everybody's in. So, all right. Just waiting on a few more folks to vote here. So this, just let me make a little introduction here for YouTube. This is the July 22nd, 2021 Class 117 AEMT morning lecture. All right. All right, let's see. Looks like everybody's has voted. 77% of you guys got the correct answer. The correct answer is bicarbonate. Two folks said sodium and 5 of you guys said potassium. Nobody picked magnesium. That's good. All right, let's do another one real quick.
Instructor Morris, Williams was he was clicking the wrong Zoom link, so he was trying to enter the wrong room. But I got him to click on the right one now, so now it's just saying it's waiting for you to let him in.
Okay, appreciate it, man. All right, 3 more votes. 2 more. All right, 30 out of 31's voted. It looks like 30% of you guys picked the respiratory system. 1 person picked the renal system. 60% of you guys picked the correct answer being the buffer system. And 2 of you guys just picked none of the above. All right. Mace, where did you send me that picture to?
Your phone
Okay.
via text.
Let's take a look at this. All right, give me just 1 second here. Okay. So we got CO2 plus H2O yields H2CO3, which makes HCO3 minus plus H plus. Respiratory acidosis. So we have an increase in CO2, a decrease in pH. That is correct. Alkalosis, a decrease, an increase in pH. That is correct. Metabolic acidosis, a decrease of that would be correct. And an increase in bicarb would bring along an increase in pH, and that is correct. Because that's what, so let's break it down. So anytime we have an increase in CO2, we're going to have an increase in what? If you're retaining CO2,
Acid.
what do you, acid. Very good. So if we're getting more acid, our pH will drop because that will reflect becoming more acidic. Now, If we look at alkalosis, which means we're not acidic, it's the opposite. We're too basic. All right, so we have a decrease in CO2, right? And so makes sense. And an increase in pH. So that's right. On the metabolic side, what he's done here is he's just showing us the bicarbonate. And so we talked about bicarbonate, it's Pepto-Bismol, Pepsid AC. Bicarbonate reduces acid. We take it for heartburn, we take it for acid indigestion, right? And so if we have a decrease in bicarbonate, we're going to have a decrease in pH because we don't have enough bicarbonate hanging around to fight acid. Therefore, the pH would drop. If we have a lot of bicarbonate, if we took a whole bunch, an overdose on Pepsid AC, or I drink 3 bottles of Pepto-Bismol, we would have plenty of bicarbonate there in the system, and our pH would reflect that by coming up. So very good. All right. So let's talk about this again, about the fastest and who's doing what. All right, so we have CO2, right? Carbon dioxide, we know that it's bad news because it causes acid, plus H2O. And we know that when we talk about water, we say that we kind of reference the blood because the blood is mostly water. If we add all of these together, we're going to have 2 hydrogen, 1 carbon, 3 oxygen. And lo and behold, that creates, you could call it the buffer system. You call this just plain buffer. But in its current state, it is carbonic acid. Carbonic acid happens to be a weak acid, right? And why do we call that a weak acid? Is it because of its actual strength?
The bond is weak.
Yeah, that bond is weak, meaning the hydrogen bond's weak. Means it can't keep up with its brother. It's a terrible babysitter. So it loses a hydrogen very easily. Why would it need to lose a hydrogen? Well, it would need to lose a hydrogen in case we become acidic. Here's the hydrogen that it loses.
Instructor Morris.
There's your bicarb. Yes, sir.
Hey, can we try muting everyone's microphone? And if not, it might be coming from your end. We're getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I did it earlier. Let me mute it back again.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Okay. Everybody's muted now. All right, so, whoops. All right, so, I love it when it happens. All right, so here we go. And so we've got our bicarb. And so this really is the system. These two arrows reflect the fact that this reaction can go to the right or it can go to the left, meaning if we become too acidic, right? If we are having an issue where we can't breathe, or we're having a metabolic issue like we overdose on Pepsid AC. Well, I'm sorry, that would make us alkaline. So if we have a trouble, we become acidic, we can't breathe. We have a diabetic problem where glucose can't get into the cell, all right? And we become acidic that way. This reaction is going to go to the right because there's your bicarb right there. Well, if we become too alkalotic, okay, that now we've taken too much Pepsid AC, right? An overdose on something that would just, make us breathe super fast, etc. Then this reaction needs to go this way so that we become, so we'll pick up this carbonic acid. So let's slide down a little bit. Let's look at the big picture again. All right, so blood is mostly H2O, water. Okay. So here we have our heart here. We have the right side of the heart, the left side of the heart. We know this very well. We know that blood returns to the right side of the heart here. It's deoxygenated blood. It's coming in through the superior and inferior vena cava. It's then going to go through the into the right atrium, the tricuspid valve, right ventricle, the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary arteries out to the lungs, right? Where it gets oxygenated. It comes back to the left side here, left atrium, goes to the bicuspid valve, left ventricle, right? Aortic valve, and then out the aorta. So this is oxygenated blood at this point. And we know that we're going to want to give up O2 here to the cell. But we also know that the cell needs to get rid of CO2. And we understand that as part of diffusion. We've talked a lot about it. So we talked a little bit about this yesterday too. We said like 23% of this CO2 is going to be taken back to the right side as deoxygenated, and that CO2 gets dropped off at the alveoli, right? And so we can represent that right here, 23% CO2. And so what we're saying there is we're breathing that off. We are breathing that CO2 off. Okay. The 70, whatever it was 70%. 70% of this CO2 is going to mix with blood, which really what we mean is H2O, right? To create the body's buffer system. All right, so if we look back up here now, we can represent that CO2 plus H2O. Now, let me slide this over a little bit. Now, what we like to say here is that this kind of represents the respiratory side of things, because this kind of represents that 23% that's going to be exhaled through the lungs. We like to represent this part right here, the buffer, with the 70% of CO2 that mixes with the blood to create the buffer system. Then we like to represent this side over here as the renal system, because we know that the kidneys play a role in acid base, a big role, but they're delayed to the game. They don't get there for a day or two. So when we talk about the speed, when we talk about how the body corrects a acidic environment, or how does the body correct an alkalotic environment, right? We are going to look at the buffer system being the fastest and the most efficient. So a close second. Why is it a close second? Because we're circulating CO2. This is circulating in the blood. This is too, but it gets dropped off at the alveoli. So a close second will be the respiratory system. Okay. And then the one, obviously, a day or two late to the game, right? It's, it's kind of like the Marine Corps. They're usually late to the game. It's always, the Army that's there first. Am I right, Barker?
Other way around.
If I've learned anything in this class, you got me now.
I'm just joking, but it's going to be the kidneys. They're just going to be late to the game. All right, so that's how that works. So let's talk about, start putting it together a little bit further. And this is stuff that you guys know, right? This is stuff you guys know. Just got to remember it. Just got to remember it. All right, so we have the chemoreceptors, right? And those chemoreceptors are in the arch of the aorta, right? And if you can imagine the carotids being up here, okay, they're located also there as well in the carotids. So there's sensors, right? And chemical sensors, right? And so the peripheral is going to monitor the CO2 and O2. And then if we go over here to the respiratory part of the brain, okay, so if we go over here, let's go over here maybe, and we talk about the pons, right? the medulla oblongata, right? The base of the, base here. Well, that's where your where your central chemoreceptors live. And these guys receive information. They're going to receive information from the peripheral chemoreceptors, right? They're going to receive reports on CO2. They're going to receive reports on the O2. These guys also monitor the amount of hydrogen ions, AKA acid. They keep up with that. And so specifically, they collect that information from cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, that's where they collect that from. And so a communication, right? These will communicate with these guys. And of course, we already talked about the information given. All right. And so we know then that we have the diaphragm, large muscle responsible for 70% of breathing, that can be innervated meaning stimulated by their sensors that they have right here. And the message in an acidotic state would be to contract deep, contract fast. So let's start pushing more. As much as this 23% of CO2, let's start pushing as much of that stuff as we can out.
Alden got kicked out.
Yeah, I just accepted him back in.
Okay.
Thank you, though. Thanks for telling me, because sometimes I miss it. All right, and so that's how this whole system starts working. Everything comes down to how much CO2 do we have. So in an increased, we know that if we have increase in CO2, we're going to have a decrease in that pH, meaning we're becoming more acidic. We have to blow off that CO2 as best we can. Then the kidneys get into the game, but they're late, right? The message comes down here to these guys, and they can do a couple of things. Well, one is they can start releasing hydrogen ions through urine, okay, which is really cool. But they can also recirculate. All right, we can recirculate bicarbonate. So in order to continuously try to start bringing down start bringing up the pH, right? We need to get that pH up because it's too low. We're acidic. We need to not let any bicarbonate leave. We need to keep that bicarbonate in the system. It's extremely important. So the messages go out. It's just like the message that goes out over here, right, to the adrenal gland. When a patient is in hypovolemic shock, to release epi and to release norepi. It's the same signal that's coming out. We got a signal coming out saying, hold up on releasing bicarbonate, but go ahead and release as much hydrogen as you can, etc. So chapter 8 covers really metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis, respiratory acidosis, and respiratory alkalosis. In chapter 8, you have to start determining what you have. This chapter wants you to understand the buffer, right? It wants you to understand how it works, how this equation works. So that's where we need to get to for this chapter. But really, you should, after learning this, start being able to plug it in, right? Start being able to plug it in and start kind of, figuring it out a little bit. Let's go back over here and let's go back and let's talk about glycolysis because it plays a role here too. So glucose needs to come into the cell, right? And ideally, who would you want glucose to meet up with in the cell?
Oxygen.
Yeah, oxygen. That's who you really want it to meet up with is oxygen. Because if oxygen is there, what can eventually happen?
You can go into the Krebs cycle and electron
Absolutely.
change.
Right. So we can actually come in here to this mitochondria and go to the Krebs cycle. Electron transport chain, right? In order so that we can get that 32 moles of ATP so that we can get some heat, some water, byproduct of all of that CO2. So that's what you want to happen, right? And so glycolysis happens irregardless whether there's O2 or not. But you can't make it into the mitochondria without O2. It is required. You can't get this 32 moles of ATP, right, without oxygen. It's not going to happen. So anytime you come in here and you don't have O2, you're going to become acidic. Okay. Another requirement, though, is glucose. Because it's a reaction. It's like in order to have 1 + 1 to equal 2, if you don't have this one or that one, you're not going to have this. You're not going to have 32 moles of ATP. It's not going to happen. And so in order for glucose to enter that cell, right, we're going to have that insulin molecule to come in. It unlocks that for glucose. It's the key. So if insulin is not present, glucose will never make it into the cell. If glucose doesn't come into the cell, you're going to get pyruvic acid irregardless of whether glucose makes it in or O2 makes it in, you're getting it. But the problem is it's going to change to something much worse, to lactic acid, right? which is going to pump out a bunch of hydrogen ions.
Dr.
It's
Morris.
going to, yeah.
So I thought that pyruvic acid is the product of glycolysis.
It is.
So if there's no glucose coming in, how is the pyruvic acid being created?
Right. It's pyruvic acid. You're going to get,
Some,
right.
enough. Right.
Kind of like that. But well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that you're going to have pyruvic acid in the cell irregardless.
Got it.
Even though pyruvic acid is that product of oxygen or glucose coming in.
I see.
Pyruvic acid's going to occur either way though,
Okay.
but it's going to turn to this bad lactic acid, right? If you had this and pyruvic acid inside the cytosol, then you could come into the mitochondria. But the mitochondria won't let us in without glucose or oxygen. You got to have one or the other. I mean, you got to have both.
Right. Got it.
I'm sorry if I confused you, but
No, you're good.
okay. So lactic acid here. And so that's what's going to happen. All right. And so that leads to what we talked about yesterday too. When we talked about the effects on the cell when you have a bunch of hydrogen ions, aka acid, hanging out. It's like a street gang hanging out on the corner, man. You know, you see them coming and you go, you know, I'm not locked in. I'm not locked
That's
in.
why you got to get locked in, man.
That's right. You got to get locked in. But, you know, the cell, it doesn't get locked in like this. And so it's living its good life right till this, right? Because what is, and you'll have to know this in chapter 8. You have to know that potassium is the primary intracellular ion. You have to know in chapter 8 that sodium is the primary extracellular ion. Okay. And you'll need to know, you need to know the role of calcium too. All right. So calcium good old calcium. Calcium is, did Instructor Lillard tell y'all that calcium's like the freshman in high school?
He
No.
did not.
He's such an asshole. Oh, I'm recording this. Sorry. I didn't mean that. So I'm going to teach I didn't know if he had time or whatever, but I'm going to teach something called the school theory on this. It puts all these guys in a kind of place you can kind of understand, like high school. Hang on one second. Good morning. Your biscuits on the table. Okay. I'll teach you. I love you. All right. So calcium holds the door open so that sodium and potassium can come in and out. But all of this goes astray because, like I said, all three of these guys were living the good life till now. When hydrogen comes in, it's going to kick potassium to the curb. All right.
Wait, what was calcium's role again?
Yeah, calcium basically holds that on the sodium potassium pump. When we're referring to that, calcium helps to keep the channels open or closed to allow the potassium to exit and the sodium to come in. Calcium is the door holder. Those are called if you technically, those are called calcium channels that sodium and potassium go through. But we'll talk more about that in chapter 8. So hydrogen kicks potassium out. It stops letting calcium do its job and holding the door, and keeps sodium at bay as well, kind of keeps sodium out here. So yeah, we got problems now, right? Because these are big players, right? So these are big players. These are big players in muscle contraction. All right. Not only that, but conductive pathways. All right. So if I come back up here and we start talking about these pathways, we got the SA node, right? The AV node, the Purkinje fibers that surround the ventricles. These are conductive pathways. And when you're looking at having something called hyperkalemia or hypercalcemia, because these are hyper. Why are they hyper? Because we can see them now. They're outside of the cell. They're in the extracellular fluid. And when we do a blood test, we can see them. And we know that there's a certain level that we should see in the extracellular fluid because these guys come in and out. But we should not see a bunch of potassium out there. We shouldn't see a bunch of calcium out there. And we shouldn't see a bunch of sodium out there either. And so we know then if we see that, we should start expecting irregular cardiac rhythms, even to the point with you could even VFib, death, all of that is from that. So acid plays a big role in killing that cell or disrupting the cell.
We're at about 45 now.
All right, cool. Let's take 15 minutes and we'll come back. Let me get this timer up here.
Instructor Morris.
Yeah.
So during an acidic state, how do the kidneys maintain a normal pH? Are they going to hold on to that bicarbonate?
Hang on one second. I'm coming to you now. So I'm sorry. Ask me that question one more time.
So during an acidic state, how do the kidneys hold on? Or how do they like maintain a normal pH? Are they going to hold on to that bicarbonate?
All right. Yeah. So that's exactly right. They are. And the kidneys have two options. So they have two options. Oh, you can't see me. Hang on,
I'm on page 260. And I was
just let me bring the whiteboard back up so you can see what I'm doing here.
And could you explain bicarbonate to me one more time? I understand the process of it, I think, but I'm just trying to
let me answer your first question.
Okay.
So here's your two options that how the kidneys respond to somebody in an acidic state or alkalotic state. So we can actually take hydrogen ions, which is acid, and we could get rid of that through urinating. Or what you said was correct. We can take bicarbonate, and instead of getting rid of it, we're going to keep it, all right, and recirculate it. So we don't have to make any more. Okay, so that's the answer to your first question. And then what was the second question about explaining bicarbonate? Is that what you said?
Yeah, could you explain that one more time?
Sure. Absolutely.
Because the renal system has to deal with the bicarbonate, right?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, all of it does. Well,
so-
all of it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So if you look right here at this H2CO3, well,
Mhm.
this is known as the body's buffer system, even though this H2CO3 in its chemical form is called carbonic acid. Okay. But that's the body's buffer. So when it loses a hydrogen, okay, so what I mean is if the body becomes too acidic, you see right here, we have two hydrogens. Well, we let one go.
Mhm.
And so now we have this hydrogen here. It's just out here by itself. And then we have HCO3 minus. And what that is called bicarbonate. So bicarbonate is a liquid, okay, that if I was to have a glass right here, and let's say in this glass, I have a lot of acid. We have a lot of acid floating around here in this beaker or glass, whatever you want to call it. And I wanted to if I want to dilute this acid because it's very acidic. Right now it's has a pH of 4. Okay, and so I want to make this less acidic. So what I could do is I could take something called bicarbonate.
Mhm.
And I could pour it in my beaker here, and it will dissolve this acid. It will absorb it and change that pH. Instead of
So
4, it's going to
the only
bring that
thing-
pH up.
The only thing I'm not understanding is I thought the buffer was the compound that like it's all right. So basically, your question earlier was the fastest mechanism for correcting the body's acid-base abnormalities was the buffer. So I thought that was the one that corrected the acid. So how's it going to lose a hydrogen?
Yep. Because what? Let me write this up here. Because in its form right here, H2CO3. This is in definition a weak acid.
Mm.
Okay. And so they don't define it as a weak acid because it won't eat your skin off or something like
So
that.
buffer is the weak acid and then bicarbonate is the stronger acid?
Nope.
Oh,
But you're almost there. So this is a weak acid because this hydrogen is there's two of them. And they don't stay together very strongly. And so it's real easy for me to separate this hydrogen out to make it just H by itself and then have HCO3 minus, which is bicarbonate. It's weak. It's a weak acid. Basically think about it like this. H2CO3 is reversible. It can be a base or it can be an acid depending on how you want it to be. It's a key that will start 2 different cars. That's basically what it is. It can be what you want it to be when you want it to be it. Meaning
Okay.
if we're too acidic, it can become bicarbonate. If we're too alkalotic, it can become an acid. So it can be whatever you want it to be at a moment's notice.
Got it.
And so that's why it's the fastest. It's the most versatile, and it's the body's using it all the time.
Okay, I
And
see.
so the second fastest would be breathing it off, which is your respiratory.
Hmm.
And think about this like, so if we go down here and where I've got the O2 and CO2 coming out of the blood cells, and I said, you know, O2 is going to leave here, this red blood cell, and it's going to pick up that dirty CO2 and it's going to take it up here to the alveoli, right? Well, it's doing that anyway. So we're just going to increase the amount that it does it. So it makes it the second fastest. But when you go, and this is kind of how I remember it. Now, it's probably not, it may not be factual, but it's how I remember it. The brain has to communicate with the kidneys to pee off hydrogen and to hold bicarb. So I look at that. Sometimes it takes time to call somebody and tell them what you want them to do.
Right.
You know, sometimes you'll call somebody and go, hey, can you do me a favor? And these are the people that go, what do you need? And you have to tell them the simplest thing, 10 times. You just want them to run to the store and get you something. And you basically have to tell them what aisle it's on. You're like, damn it, I'll just do it myself. Well, it takes time to communicate. And so that's why the last in line is the kidneys. It takes a while, but once they get it, they're on it.
Okay, I see.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, good.
Did you get the syllabus yet for this
Kind of
AEMT?
haven't, because I need to kind of get through this first.
Oh, like
I need
this?
to- this is
whole
one.
week
Yeah,
of-
this kind of might slow us down some.
Yeah.
I'll have the syllabus hopefully by Friday.
Do you think we're gonna be back in school next week?
Oh God, I hope so. Man, I hope so. I don't know though. We're just gonna have to see.
I have another little question real quick. So is the bicarbonate itself, is that that's the compound itself? That's not the kidneys, right? That's just what helps the kidneys, right? Is the kid?
So the bicarb itself helps everybody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the bicarb itself, bicarb is what bicarb is going to do though. Bicarb is going to float around and find acid,
Mhm.
and it's going to dissolve it.
Okay.
It's floating around in the bloodstream and all that. The kidneys are just going to hold it back.
Right. Oh, so that's what helps it maintain that normal pH.
You got it. You
All
just
right,
got it. Yeah, that's exactly what it does. Instead of getting rid of it, the body goes, hey, I need it, all of it I can get. Yeah, I need it floating around in my bloodstream.
So it'll
yeah.
hold it. Okay. When will it extract it? When would it say I don't need any more? The kidneys.
Like when we're healthy, it's part of homeostasis. Like you go eat lunch, you eat a hamburger or something. Well, you become a little more acidic, so you need some extra bicarb. And so the body produces it, but once it's fixed, you don't need to keep that much of it. So you'll get rid of it by urinating it out.
Okay. All right, yeah, that helped.
Good. All right, guys, I'll be right back. All right, we're back. So, how we feeling about this stuff?
Not bad.
Not bad.
Let's cut the Morris.
Uh-huh.
This test on the 29th is over just chapter 7 or is it over chapter 8 as well?
No, it's just 7.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, does anybody have any questions on this stuff? All right. Because I can move on past this. Let me see here. Oh, you know what I need to do? Hang on a second. Well, look, I may send you guys out an email. I was talking to Edson yesterday. So we have an ebook to go with our course, and I may have to give you guys a different course number to log in with. So I just got to go back and like figure out exactly what I'm going to have to do to get you the ebook. But we all got ebooks, so I'll let you guys know something. I'll try to get that done between 12 and 1 or something like that, or maybe after I get done with this afternoon session. But that's where I'm at with that. Let's see here.
My class thing with physical violence.
Whoops, I don't want that. All right, let's just let's see, 1 second. Just trying to get the PowerPoint up here. All right, cool. All right, so the skeletal system anatomy, you guys, this will just be a review on that. Remember the growth plate, okay? Because that I'm sure will be on there on our exam. So let's see here. You know, the epiphyseal plate. Let me get a, see if I can get a pointer up here. 1 second. All right. Okay. Let's see here. There we go. Joints. Probably not going to see a lot of joints. I wouldn't worry about the joints. So here, you know, your axial skeleton, right? what is composed of your skull, thoracic cage, and vertebral columns, right? So it's everything that provides the support to the appendicular skeleton, which is your appendages, your arms, legs, stuff like that. Go back over and know your facial bones, know these bones here, your cranium, your parietal, temporal, occipital. And I mentioned that orbital fracture the other day. Like what's another name for an orbit fracture, a blowout fracture? Yeah, you'll see that again.
What's the shaft bone?
I'm sorry, the shaft bone?
Yeah, it's right there. It says right there, long bones consist of shaft. Okay.
Oh, okay. Like this is like basically the shaft of the bone, the
Oh, okay,
diaphysis.
okay.
Yeah. And so yeah, so know your facial bones. Don't worry about all of these.
Yeah, instructor, that picture right there was what was giving me a pause.
Give you a hard time. Yeah, don't worry about that. but these are part of your skull. So frontal bone, temporal bone, occipital bone, know that. I just, just with this, when you're looking at the floor of the skull here, or the cranial vault, this is how you get brain bleeds. When the brain moves around, it hits these little fossas, and that's what causes that. Yeah, I don't expect you guys to know all of those. The foramen magnum from last time. Everybody seemed to know that one. Here's your facial bones. Blowout fracture right here. Leakage of blood and fat into the maxillary sinus. I would know that ethmoid and sphenoid. This, you ever heard of a TMJ? Some people have problems with their jaw. They feel like it's, it gets really sore in the joint of their jaw. They can't chew. Sometimes because of inflammation. You have to know about the thyroid cartilage. Here's your carotid arteries. You already know about that. Your sternocleidomastoid muscles. These are used for breathing. There's your trachea. We already talked about how important it is to know this. So it's just, I think it's important to understand how the spinal cord is protected here. Okay. So, and this is basically the inside of a vertebrae. You see your spinal cord here. I don't know. We'll come back to this if we need to revisit this, we will. Right now, just understand that this is where the spinal cord is, how it's protected, and how if you have a fracture, one of these things can become very sharp, and how this is how spinal cords are severed or lacerated. Then the thorax, the sternal notch, the mandibular, xiphoid process, all of this stuff is not new. Not new. See how the descending aorta, once you're past the pelvis, it changes names, changes it to your femoral artery. Nothing new here. Nothing new. So we know, whoops, sorry, one second. We know that bones are a living substance. they do require blood supply. That's part of the bone marrow. But they do consist of collagen. Remember the three types of muscle. We studied that a lot. The cardiac muscle. And what is unique about cardiac muscle?
Automaticity.
Automaticity. Very good. Skeletal muscle, right? And then smooth muscle. And so which one between skeletal muscle and smooth muscle, which one would be involuntary versus voluntary?
Smooth is involuntary.
That is correct. Because skeletal muscle we use to move. So walking is a voluntary thing. I'm not gonna quiz you guys on the muscles. We may, unless it's a muscle used for, accessory muscles to breathe. I'm not gonna quiz you on that. Again, so the function of muscles is to protect, right? We know that. It has to have an energy source. And so we've talked about how metabolism works and how ATP is created. And so that's the energy, the energy source for muscles is ATP. We talked about potassium and calcium and how important it is for muscle contraction. That goes for all muscles. We definitely talked about this, about the oxygen requirement, right? So oxygen is required for the breakdown of glucose because, oxygen speeds up that reaction. And so when we're talking, it's talking about here about muscle fatigue, right? And so, and I know a lot of you guys are avid in your workouts, Barker. But seriously, he understands muscle fatigue because that's what he works out a lot. But muscle fatigue is when you lose that energy source, which is ATP, right? And so it's a natural process in those muscles in your arms and legs. Once you work them over past that what they're used to working, meaning they lose their ability to recover enough to get enough oxygen uh, in order to go into that um, to go into the process to make it into the mitochondria. It's muscle fatigue. And that soreness you feel is lactic acid. When your arms are sore and your legs are sore from working out, it's lactic acid. It developed because there wasn't enough oxygen at the time to satisfy the needs, and that is an oxygen debt. And so then here we are at the respiratory system anatomy. Hasn't changed since EMT school. Nasal pharynx, your oral pharynx, right? The larynx is what separates the upper respiratory system from the lower. Trachea, right? Bronchioles left and right, or bronchus rather, left and right. And then bronchioles and bronchioli. Here's your alveoli. This should be old. You should want to vomit right now. You've heard it so much. Nothing new here at all. Sorry, guys. All right. Lower airway consists of anything below the larynx, right? So we have the trachea, the bronchioles. They say bronchial tree just to include all of it. Alveoli. We know gas exchange occurs there. Nothing new. So yeah, lungs. So the primary organs for breathing. So what causes us to breathe? Well, we know that it's the CO2 drive, right? We're on a hypercapnic drive. But the reason for us to take a breath, remember, is that pressure inside that chest cavity, inside the thoracic cavity, that causes us to breathe. All right. The pleural space, also known as that potential space, right? Between the pleurals, the visceral pleural and the parietal pleural. Primary muscle of breathing, definitely the diaphragm. Remember, the diaphragm can be voluntary or involuntary.
Instructor,
Yes.
could you go back to that picture?
Yep.
Is the vena cava going through the diaphragm? Is there like a hole in the middle of it?
In this case, no. I think it's just a representation. It's, it's posterior to the diaphragm. So here's your diaphragm. Here's your vena cava is posterior to the behind it. Here's your aorta behind it.
Okay, I was just confused.
Okay. All right, guys, I'm sorry. I got to return a phone call real quick. Can we take a 10-minute break? Apologize.
No, not allowed.
Damn it, Bloom. I really need to, though. I just got to return. I got to return a phone call really quick. I apologize, and I will come right back. It'll probably be less than 10 minutes.
We're not at 45.
I know. Be right back.
You're messing with the natural law.
Shut up, Edson. He's gone.
We'll be here in 10 minutes. I'll meet him down there.
Dixon, are you in your car? I know you heard me, Dixon.
Yeah.
Oh,
Campbell's looking pretty swole.
so the green screen you guys got behind y'all. Well, some of you guys.
Sleeping like normal.
Hey, y'all shut up. This is silent 10 minutes.
Damn.
Shut up.
Grim, I will snap you right now.
Hey, you better, hey, look at this ain't Colorado, my boy.
Shut up before I send you a friend request on Facebook.
Jones, you need a haircut before you say anything to me, dog.
Damn.
Actually, I need a haircut. I really don't. I don't need it. You need to stop shaving your shit. That's what you need to do.
My hair already back, titty boy.
You ain't gonna do nothing but shave it tomorrow. Now that I've put it in your brain, you're gonna wake up tomorrow and shave that shit.
All right. I'm back. Sorry about that.
Welcome back, sir. We're still recording.
Yes, we are still recording.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and put my letter in.
So diffusion, we've talked about that. We've talked about how we're going from an area of greater concentration to an area of lower concentration, right? That's it. We've covered that quite a bit. Nothing new there either. So here we are diffusing here at the body cellular, right? And then we have the actual diffusion of O2 and CO2 in the lungs. Okay. Hypoxic drive. We know that's a backup, right? What kind of disease process would we look at for somebody on a hypoxic drive?
COPD.
Yep.
Yeah.
COPD.
Okay.
Emphysema.
Yeah, COPD, emphysema, both are acceptable. Remember, we got to have that backup for those folks because they retain so much CO2 that the body just can't read it anymore, and it has to switch. We covered this quite a bit. This is our acid base. Here's a look at the pH scale. You can see here that pure water is at 7. Blood is here at 7.35 to 7.45. Baking soda is about 8.5, maybe 8.4. Ammonia. So remember, I was talking about some really basic or really basic stuff is used for cleaners. So yeah, ammonia. Look at bleach. Very basic. Oven cleaner. All right, and so then we can look down here at the stomach acids. We're about a 1. Lemon juice, pH of about 2. Vinegar, 3. So some really acidic stuff down here. Here's our buffer system. They use this bucket as an example, the circulating bicarbonate buffer system, put it in a bucket. And basically what they're saying here is that if one, it's spilling over and on the respiratory component, are they? All right, just let them in if you don't. Or are they at the door yet?
No.
All right. Okay. Just show, yeah. They should be fine. Tell them I'll be with them in a minute. All right, so I don't like the bucket system. It never worked for me. Just never has, but it's in your book. If it helps you, great. But here, here we have acid and base. I gave the example a minute ago with Williams, kind of like the bucket system. You have a bucket here full of something that's very acidic, an acidic liquid. Well, we're going to put some base in there to get rid of it, to get rid of that acidic, that acid, and that base is bicarbonate. If it gets too basey, we can put some acid in there and make it more neutral. So. All right, so here again, if you want to make a solution more acidic, you need a higher concentration of the hydrogen ion. If you want to make a solution more basic, right, then you need to reduce the amount of hydrogen ions. We talked about the calcium ions, how they shift out of the cell. Okay. And they shift out of the cell, well, like we showed you, because we have so much hydrogen ions there, and they're not the only ones. The potassium, and so is the sodium as well. Hang on one second, guys. Let me let the exterminator in real quick. Hey, man. Good, buddy. How are you? Hey.
You're dropping chips all over your mom's chair.
Sure you guys access. Appreciate it, Cambo. Thank you. Sorry, guys. All right, so we talked about that. So here's the three main components, guys, of this buffer system. the circulatory bicarbonate buffer. We have that respiratory component, and then the renal. Y'all feel pretty good about understanding these three components?
Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So then we've talked about this part too, the nervous system control of breathing. It's found in the brainstem and at the medulla oblongata, right? And so it brings up here, you guys know from EMT school how much BS I think this is, the DRG and the VRG, right? Because the science community can't even decide whether they want to agree with it or not. But basically, it talks about how how it stimulates your diaphragm to contract for so many seconds, and things like that. I won't ask you anything about the DRG or the VRG. Everybody should understand tidal volume by now. And then that inspiratory reserve, right? So what it's saying here is the deepest breath you can take after a normal breath. And so this helps to ventilate those parts of your lung below the alveoli, right? It's not really dead space, but it's like a reserve space. And so imagine, when you have a sigh, when you go, and you do that every so often, whether you notice it or not, you'll breathe a little bit deeper than the other normal breaths that you've had. And that's to keep that inspiratory reserve volume oxygenated. These are just normal definitions. That dead space, we remember that, right? Dead space is in that part of the respiratory system where we lose air or lose oxygen. Like when we breathe in, we lose some of that in the oral pharynx. Some of it gets stuck in the trachea. We don't get all of that 500 mils, right? And then here we go with the characteristics of normal breathing. It's important to understand, right? A normal rate and depth, right? Regular rhythm. We need good audible breath sounds, the good sounds, not the stridor sounds, right? The regular chest rise and fall on both sides of the chest, right? If we see just one side coming up, then we know that, we may have a problem. We may have a thoracic injury in that case. Movement of the abdomen. There should be a little bit of movement in the abdomen, but not a lot. And we know that children will have a lot of movement in the abdomen. The good old circulatory system. We've been talking about this a lot today too, and how we have the systemic respirations down here, right, where we are doing the gas exchange for O2, picking up CO2. And then we have pulmonary circulation or gas exchange here, where we're trading out dirty CO2 and picking up fresh O2. This up here represents the tissue, like your brains, things like that, in the upper part of the body. This would be down here, the lower part where your legs and feet are. By now, I don't think I'm not even going to go through the blood flow because you know that by now. So the function of the heart is to do what?
Pump blood.
Pump. That's it. To pump. Pump the blood. And so the anatomy of the heart, you probably know it very well too. Here's your superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. Your large left ventricle, the smaller right ventricle. We have the valves of the heart, obviously, right? We have the tricuspid valve right here, bicuspid valve right here. Try before you buy. These valves are actually held in place by the papillary muscles here. The valve flaps are called cusp. It says right here about the aortic valve and pulmonary valve being divided. They divide the heart from the aorta and pulmonary arteries, but it also allows for functions of the heart to be a little different from right and left. We know that right side of the heart, its function really is to receive blood from the body and get it to the pulmonary side for gas exchange. And then we know that left side of the heart is, receives blood that's oxygenated, and then its job is to pump it out to the, to the body. We got heart sounds. That's probably new to you guys. When you're listening for heart sounds, there's there's S1 and S2. We call it lub and dub. And what in S1, what you're hearing is the closure of your mitral valves and your tricuspid valves, right? And it says the start of systole. What does systole mean?
The beat, the pump.
It's like the pressure in your vessels after the contraction of that ventricle.
Well, yeah, systole means contraction, right? So if I put asystole in front of that, that would mean without contraction. So what S1 is the closure of your tricuspid and your bicuspid valves at the start of the contraction. And if we listen, if we S2, it's the actual closure of the aortic and pulmonic valve at the end of the contraction.
So the closure of the tricuspid valve occurs during contraction?
Yeah, so those valves close to allow blood not to come back as soon as right at the start of contraction. And at the end of the contraction, that's when you hear the aortic and pulmonic valves close.
So is that like when we're listening through like the stethoscope, hearing that doom, 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 doom?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, that's blood pressure that you're talking about there, but this would actually be something that you would hear with a stethoscope if you placed it over the heart. And you just listen to that.
Okay.
So how important a heart sounds? I'll be honest with you, I never listened to them. I may be missing out on a really good assessment tool though. I don't know. I just, I just never have got, into it. I think probably in hospital thing where you can control the noise, it's probably really important. The problem is in a pre-hospital setting, it's an uncontrolled environment where you can't always, you know, have access to, to listening to something like that. So I don't know. It's a good question. I personally, I mean, I know what they are. I learned them just like you are, but as far as practicing them, I just don't do it. Yeah. And so that's why I said you have to learn it because you might see a question on the exam on that, on hard sounds, stuff like that. So you have to know it. But as far as practicing it, I don't know. The electrical conductive system. So yeah, so we know that we talked about how important the brain is about controlling heart rate and the strength of contractions, right? Because it's a different receptor now. We're talking not chemoreceptors anymore. We're talking baroreceptors, right? And so they communicate with the cardiac center of the brain. And they talk about, increasing the contraction, the strength of the contraction, and maybe even the rate of the contraction. And we talked about that. Remember when we were talking about epi and norepi? Beta 1, beta 2, beta 1, 1 heart, beta 2, 2 lungs, right? And we said beta 1 can increase the strength of the contraction, but it can also increase the heart rate by speeding up that conductive system. So here we have the pacemaker of the heart, the SA node, and followed by the AV node. Let's see here. I wanted to mention something about that. So yeah, electrical impulses, they travel down the conductive system right here. So SA node, usually 80 to 100 beats per minute. But this system, as it goes down, it slows, the impulses slow. And the first place that it slows is at the AV node, right? So these guys control the impulses of how they're delivered. So 80 to 100 beats per minute, it comes down to the AV node, it slows down to 60. And then by the time you get to the impulses down here around the Purkinje fibers, you're looking at 20 to 40 impulses.
Hold on 1 second. You said an electrical impulse travels down and it slows at the AV node?
It does.
Okay.
It does. You're right. Exactly right. So know this definition right here, chronotropic state, and no dromotopic state, and inotropic state. Know what they mean. So chronotropic, see if it actually defines it for us.
Before you find a definition, a baroreceptor is just monitoring changes in the arterial pressure. That's what a
Yeah, so
baroreceptor.
that would be correct on the arterial side, and
Okay.
they're monitoring the stretch of the vessel.
All right.
So baroreceptors respond to change in pressure, and they usually do within the heart or the main arteries. Very good. The heart's chronotropic state, right? So that's talking about beats per minute, right? Chronotropic means rate. Okay, let's see here. All right, so what happens, when we're talking about the baroreceptors here, is that the baroreceptors, we start dealing with the nervous system, don't we? Because baroreceptors are, they're going to monitor the stretch. And so they know if they're less filled, right? So they know if there's not enough blood there. And so it's going to communicate, right, with the brain. And it's going to say, hey, I have a loss of stretch, meaning I have a loss of volume. And so then that puts the game players in play, right? We're going to have a release of epi, release of norepi to bring about vasoconstriction. And so when we're talking about epi, again, we're talking about beta, talking about beta 1, beta 2. And remember, that part of beta 1 heart, the strength of the contraction or the rate of the conductive system coming down the SA node, it's going to increase those impulses. Well, by increasing those impulses, we actually increase the heart rate, and that's a chronotropic state. I just want to and when we talk about the dromotopic state, that's going to be the actual control of the rate of the electrical conduction. And chronotropic is the control of the rate of the contraction, right? So how many times the heart contracts. Dromotopic represents the control of the rate of electrical conduction. So I kind of probably said that, maybe I said it backwards. I didn't mean to. But dromotopic, think about the pacemaker of the heart. Chronotropic, think about the actual rate of the contraction of the ventricles. And then when you look at inotropic, that's going to have not just the contractions of the ventricles, but the strength of the contraction. So does that make sense to everybody? Do I need to go back over that again?
Can you say dromotopic one more time?
Sure. So dromotopic, it's what it's talking about is the control of the rate of the electrical conduction. So what it's talking about, let me back up here to the pacemaker of the heart. All right, so when we're talking about the control of the rate of electrical conduction, how fast, how these things can, conduct down the pathways, right? It's what's talking about the control of the rate of the electrical conduction, how it's coming down from the SA node to the AV node, that rate. When we're talking about chronotropic, and I think about chrono like a timepiece, is control of the rate of the actual contraction here with your ventricles. And then, so these guys could be, let's just say they could beat 100 beats per minute, right? But are they beating strong? Are they beating weakly? Somewhere in the middle? Well, it's that inotropic state that will actually control the strength of that contraction. So you have somebody controlling the electrical impulses, somebody controlling the actual contraction of the ventricle, and then you have somebody controlling how strong that contraction is going to be. That's what those definitions are talking about. And so when we're talking about that, usually when those terms come up, we're talking about the effects of beta 1, and how that's what's going on with that. That's normally when it comes up. So the cardiac cycle is just that. It's the cycle. It's just that. It's a cycle. It's a process that creates the actual pumping of the heart. So systole is, a word that means contraction. So contraction of the ventricular mass and the actual pumping of blood, excuse me, into that systemic circulation. Okay, so then there also has to be that pressure that exists in the vessels during diastole. And so that's, we've talked about that in EMT school, but it's that amount of pressure to keep those vessels open. And we associated that with afterload in the past. And then the pulse pressure, the difference between the systolic and diastolic blood pressure. And then your favorite term, afterload. We love it so much. Pressure that's in the aorta, right? They get against which the left ventricle pumps against. And we can go back to that lazy river, right? If the current's coming down the lazy river, it makes the current of the river flow. If you turn around and walk backwards against it, that's afterload. Another important definition to remember, cardiac output, because that's part of blood pressure. That's a part of blood pressure. Amount of blood pumped in 1 minute. We know about Starling's law, right? What's Frank Starling have to say about that? Anybody want to define it?
Increased venous return to the heart stretches the ventricles, resulting in increased cardiac contractility.
Right. And so when you think Frank Starling, what do you think of? I mean, what's the definition? If I say, give me the first word that comes to your mind when I say Frank Starling.
Would that be increase in size in left ventricle?
Yes. And it would be preload, right? That's exactly
Preload.
what it is. We're stretching out that left ventricle. And it's the pressure under which that ventricle fills. And there's times when we need to increase preload. Yes, sir. Hey, Bloom, y'all okay? Y'all zoning on me? Because I can't see y'all really right now. Let me see. See JoJo. See Perez.
Yeah, I just started the timer from the last break we had.
Okay.
So we're at about 35 minutes now.
Okay. Sometimes that's about all y'all can take, and I don't blame you. Y'all want to take another break?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a break then. And we'll come back in 15 minutes to continue. Let me put the timer up here. Here.
Bloom, change your background.
What was it that came a second ago? What was that Amazon package you had a minute ago?
It was empty. It was just trash.
Oh, it was trash. Okay.
A moth wants to be let in.
Yeah, I got him. I just opened. Just let him in.
Okay.
Hey, Adam, put your feet down.
All right. All right. Let me see here. All right. All right, guys, we're back here. So we did mention afterload. We know about Frank Starling. We know about preload. See, a lot of this book is to take somebody from 0 to AEMT. That's why a lot of the stuff it's in here. Well, you know it. We covered it in depth. So remember this, okay? The walls of the vessels and how you got the tunica, intima, media, and aventa. So know those. Let me close my door. All right, let's see here.
Could you go back one slide real quick?
Sure can.
The book uses different terms for these 3 layers.
One's probably a vein, one's maybe an artery.
It says the walls of blood vessels are composed of 3 layers: endothelium, elastic tissue, and connective tissue. Yeah, you're right. One's an artery and one's a vein.
Okay. Probably need to know these right coronary arteries and the left. I don't know if you need to know all 9 branches. I'll come back to the coronary arteries in a day or two to figure out exactly what you need to know about that. But, we need to know definitely that we have a right coronary artery and the left main coronary artery, the LAD. That's the one that if it gets a blockage, you ever heard of the Widowmaker? Because it's the main, like 85-90% of your heart is oxygenated with this coronary artery. So that's why they call it the Widowmaker. And here's a representation. This is the circumflex artery that goes to the posterior side, to the back side of the heart muscle. Anterior descending branch of the left coronary artery. See how it comes down and really feeds that left ventricle. Here's your right coronary artery. Here's the back view right here. And you can see the back side here, this circumflex artery coming down. We need a better slide for that though anyway. We know about pulmonary circulation. Oops, sorry. We know about that. I'll come back to the arteries. If there's any for the exam that specifically you need to know, I'll let you know what they are. I don't want you studying all of these. Definitely know like your subclavian artery right here, your internal carotid, common carotid, right there.
Dr. Morris,
Yeah.
do we have to know the left main coronary artery and what it divides into?
Yeah, I'm going to look at that and let you guys know.
Okay.
I think it's important for us to understand the coronary arteries,
Mm-hmm.
but not 9 branches of them, no.
Oh yeah, cool. Because I was looking at it, it's on page 269, and I was I think it divides into the left anterior, but you could just let me know.
I will, yeah. If they want you to know all of those, they should have provided a better slide in your book for it.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking and
do we have to know what the aorta divides into, like the 2 common iliac arteries, or no?
Yeah. So if you look,
because I see it's on 271. It says the 5th lumbar vertebra. I think that's what it is.
let's see here. I'm on that same page.
Okay.
Let me see.
Divides.
I know your aorta, goes to your abdominal aorta, goes down to the pelvis, and then changes to your femoral. Here we go. So, yeah, you have your aorta comes down. What's right there at the pelvis changes to your common iliac, and then from there down branches to your superficial femoral and deep femoral, and it goes all the way down. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. It did.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't want you guys studying a bunch of stuff that's one you can't use when you need to really understand acid base. You're really going to need to understand that. So I will let you know on that. Or everybody knows.
Do you think we're gonna have to go over total blood volume and like know the difference and like weight and stuff like that?
I saw that. Hang on 1 second.
Yeah, it's on I seen on 265, 275. My bad.
Gotcha. This is, well, we're, obviously we need to know the components, right? Red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. So we need to know that for sure. No, you're talking about, well, we need to know that plasma is 92% water, and 8% dissolved elements.
Right.
That's probably it that I can see right now. That's all I really, I know there was a question somewhere along the way about like what you're talking about, kind of like how much percentage, like an infant does whatever, but I'm not worried about, I'm not going to be,
Testing us on that.
yeah,
Okay,
compartmental
cool.
wise, how much fluid is here or there. I'm not going to ask you anything
Right.
like that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, man. I was going through the actual exam this morning, just trying to get a feel for it.
How many questions you put on the exam?
I haven't put them all on there yet.
25 questions.
I know that I'm also trying to look outside of our textbooks, test bank to try to look for questions that might be a little more national registry style type questions. Trying to get you guys better prepared, for the AEMT if I can.
And our test still is on the 27th.
Yep. So far, yep. I believe we'll be there. Like I said, all of the stuff that we've covered this morning, minus that acid base, is stuff that you guys know. And I'm boring the shit out of y'all, I know, but you guys know all of this stuff already. For the most part, of course, if I was going to say, all right, know the superior gluteal artery or whatever, you would obviously need to know to learn that where it was at. But as far as theory goes, you guys understand arteries and you understand veins. You know that arteries feed the cells, and the veins take the dirty CO2 back to the right side of the heart. You guys know that. And so I'm just looking through here to see what we have that. This is what Williams was talking about, Mango. I think right here.
Yeah, that's
like,
it right there.
Yeah, I knew it was in here. Like the blood composition, 55% plasma. How much of that's going to break down? I don't think I'm going to ask any of that. I do want to know like specifics, like, okay, plasma's mostly water, something like that.
That's all we need to know is that it's mostly water.
Yep. 45% cells suspended in plasma. I'm not going to ask you that, but red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets, the function of those guys that you already know. Red blood cells carry oxygen, white blood cells, infection fighters, and platelets they help the blood to clot. That would be that. I'm not going to, even in AEMT school, I'm not going to go through the 6 or 7 different types of white blood cells. There's no need in it. So I think what we'll do is stop here. I know we're a little bit early, but I know everybody's kind of blah, blah, blah. I want to start fresh when we start talking about blood pressure again. I want to go back over blood pressure tomorrow and really, cardiac output, stroke volume. Make sure everybody's good there. We'll talk more about this stuff, the central nervous system. We already know a lot about, we know what we need to know already about the skin. We'll talk about the pancreas and the Isles of Langerhans. We'll,
I had
we'll
a question
dive
about
in.
the aisles of Langerhans.
Yes, sir. Go ahead with it.
That's insulin and glucose, right? They're producing those groups of the cells.
Yeah, that's correct. That's when we think of the Isles of Langerhans, we're thinking glucose
Mhm.
and um, glucose is the main one. What's the other one? Golly, I'm drawing a blank. It's it releases the sugar stored in the liver. I'll think of it in a minute.
Is it glucagon? I think it's
Yes, glucagon. Thank you, glucagon. We got to talk about like the adrenal gland. I mean, we don't, yeah, nothing big there. I mean, this stuff. And then
This slideshow is all part of where we started the other day as acid base too. So this may be a stupid question, but is this slide available on the website as well?
absolutely it is. This is the slide program that's on our site.
Okay.
When I get back, I'm going to the office tomorrow. I'm going to download a couple of different other slides that I have that explain the cell membrane a little more and talk about diffusion a little more and osmosis a little more. Just so you guys will, I'll show them to you tomorrow, just so that you guys will have better slides on that stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much, that'll help you guys on that. But all this other stuff, guys, I wish there's something new or fun I could add to it. You guys are pros to this stuff. The only, like I said, the only differences in this chapter really, truly, is the cellular organelles, the cell membrane, and acid base are the three things in this chapter that you guys had no exposure to prior to AEMT school. So that's really, I mean, I'm probably going to, I'm going to go through the test bank. I'm going to be looking for questions about that stuff. I'll be looking for questions too about diffusion, blood pressure, receptors, the stuff that really drive this chapter. But I'm not going to be asking you to identify, all of the neurons in the brain, or I'm not going to ask about stuff that you guys will never see again. So it's not going to do it. But I know like acid base is for some reason is a killer on the exam. And so at least my last class told me that. And so I want to make sure we cover it really good. We're going to, organelles wise. Yeah, I'm going to cover a little bit, but be honest with you, there's probably not going to see it again after we get done with this chapter. But the cell membrane, since we're giving fluids, we need to understand all the hypertonic, hypotonic, isotonic, and we need to probably go there some more in this chapter and talk about that again. Talk about when we give sodium chloride to a person who's in a in a hypotonic state, what's happening. So I want to hit that some more before we get done with this chapter. And then probably I'll have a better idea come tomorrow sometime about this exam, about pointing towards a better direction to study. And next week we'll wrap it up. We'll be fine. You won't be surprised by anything on this exam. I promise. You'll know it all. You'll know what's going to be on there. You'll know what to study for. Bloom will not have it any other way. Okay, Bloom, make sure that we get everything out there so that you guys are ready.
That's right.
Bloom's a later.
That is right.
See? Oh, and hey Barker, I told you the other day I would email you those vouchers, and I haven't done it yet. So I'll do it tomorrow when I get back to my office. I'll up the spreadsheet that's got that information there. So for those of you needing to retest, I will send you that email. How far are we out from that? From retesting?
I think Gwen checked hers yesterday, and she, I think, was one of the first ones back, and it still said she had like a day or two.
I think I'm like 3 days away.
Okay.
So it's essentially like the beginning of next week for everyone, pretty much.
Okay.
Let everybody be available to take it.
Okay. How are y'all feeling? I mean,
I'm fine. I'm ready for the days to be over.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm very much ready for you guys.
Gonna see how it's gonna go down.
I'm gonna tell you it's gonna go down. Y'all are gonna crush it.
I'm ready to finally be an AEMT.
I know.
Not what we're talking about, Perez.
At all.
Not at all.
I'm just saying in general.
Shut up.
Ready to get it up.
You know, I wish it was a trash can and I was right next to your house, so I can throw you in the trash can right now.
Well, his trash can gonna have
You look like
something
a
in it
fucking
that you don't
thumb.
want to see.
Shut up.
Here it comes, the smack talk.
You know it's in Perez's trash can.
We
All
gonna
right,
need
guys.
it.
So everybody's got the
Goddamn.
I sent out the link for the 1 o'clock. So if you guys coming back at 1, I'll see you then. If not, I'll see you guys. I'll be coming from the office tomorrow. Is Friday, right? So I'll be there Friday to come in from there. And hopefully we'll get some information when we can get back.
Go make sure you check on that check too, all right?
Check on what?
That 3K.
Yes.
I couldn't hear you.
They talking
Check
about
on-
that 3 bands.
The 3,000 bonus that we're
Oh
supposed
God, yeah. You know, I told you guys, man, gotta be careful when they say you're gonna get something, because sometimes you don't. But I did hear that they were trying to find a way when they gave it to us, it wouldn't be taxed at that, 40%.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what they're working on.
Work on it, then. Work on it.
Hicks, you definitely need it because that camera you got, bro.
All you gotta do is
Can you wipe the Vaseline off
wipe
your camera?
Wipe it off,
Wipe the
man.
Vaseline off.
Yeah, wipe that thing off.
Said that.
computer dust cleaner and then just like wipe
Wipe it off, man. There you go. It's a little bit. Use your shirt. Go like.
Use some Kleenex.
There has to be a focus part on
You
that.
trying to see Jones? Why you want him to pick his shirt up?
If I
Gotta
get
be a
that
focus part on
bonus, Hicks, I'm gonna get you a new camera, bro. Don't even stress.
Leave my ace alone, man.
All right, guys. I'll see you guys at 1 o'clock and see the rest of you guys tomorrow, man. Have a good one.
Stay locked in.
I do.
I am. Yeah.